All right. Welcome to the Rise Up podcast. I am your host, Jonah Mitchell. And on this show, I do my best to help you simplify everything that goes into the weight loss process so that you can show up the way that you want to show up and ultimately create not only the results, but the lifestyle that you want to live without getting in your own way. Because a lot of times we make this a lot harder than it needs to be, making it more frustrating, more difficult to see the results that we want, and leads to questions of why does any of this matter, why even try, all those things, right? And also trying to do my best to provide clarity on the most effective ways to execute towards your goals. But a lot of this is aimed for the psychological side, hence what today's episode is about. And I hope you enjoy. So first and foremost, if you're a longtime listener, current client, former client, or brand new here, I just want to take a quick second and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend a little bit of time with me. And if you learn something, if I help shift your perspective, if it kind of just sheds the light on a situation that you didn't understand before, I'd really appreciate it if you just take a moment to share this with at least one person. My entire goal is to help you with wherever you're at, no matter what's going on. And if I never speak to you, if I never speak directly to you, I hope that I can even have a small impact on your journey moving forward. So if you enjoy this show and want to see more of my stuff, that is linked in the show notes. If you want abundance of resources and the community that I'm a part of, that's also in the show notes at the Transformation Project. And yeah, I think that's all this stuff on there. And we're gonna kick this show. We're gonna get this party started. The show on the road, whatever the euphemism is. And I'm really excited. I mean, I always feel like I'm talking about the psychological side of weight loss, but I really wanted to just dive into it a lot, especially today. Right, the psychology of weight loss is very complicated, or I don't want to say complicated. It's complex, and difficult to truly grasp your mind around, because there's many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that it's not always quantifiable, right? And this is why our attachment to the numbers, the scale, the body fat percentage, the inches, whatever it is, usually take precedence because they're simple. They're ways that our brain can actually quantify success, and I use air quotes because sometimes we can even see those improvements and not feel successful, and I can speak from experience. So these quote unquote success that we're looking for doesn't always align with what we think it does, but we tend to gravitate towards the things that our brain can quantify, and this is a biological response, right? We have lived for thousands of years because we've not been just the best apex predator that just out survives everything, but we're the most adaptable creatures on the planet. No matter what we're in, we can adapt to the situation and not only survive but thrive, and sometimes necessary survive through those times. And in that biology that we naturally have, right, there's tendencies that our brain and that has developed that want to be able to predict as much as it can to keep us alive, to keep us safe. Because unfortunately, I've said this once or twice before, but your body doesn't care about your weight loss goals. It doesn't care about your happiness. It cares about one thing: survival, you living, your heart pumping. That's all it cares about, right? And it often doesn't realize that comes at a cost of certain things, right? We feel like, just because we want something, we would know what to do, right? We would know that, and the signal that if sometimes it feels like our body's fighting against us. And we know, it's our body; it should do what we tell it to do. But in reality, we're telling it completely opposite things without being aware, because what's going on upstairs, and this lack of ability to quantify these things because of this survival response of wanting to predict, wanting to understand, wanting to, put things in the categories to know what's the threat level, what's the risk of the situation, right? Or how much, how little, so that so our brain can put these things in their categories to understand what is in front of it. When we can't quantify, right, it's very hard for our brain to open the doors that don't really have the space for numbers, and they're hard to actually for lack of a better term, they're hard to quantify. They're hard to look and understand without logic, right? When we try to always logic our way through this, when a lot of what we go through, especially in the psychology of weight loss, is emotional. Emotion usually always wins, and logic, even though we know what we should be doing, always gets put on the back burner. And then this turns into more emotion when we know what we should be doing and we don't do it. We feel shitty, we feel miserable, we get down on ourselves, and it's just a feedback loop that we find ourselves trapped in, right? And then it just builds over years, and eventually to the point where we stop trying, right? And I want to go through that and kind of explain that process out, because this is something that I personally struggled with the most. Like, this is, my story's long, right? I've mentioned it multiple times, right? I struggled losing weight. I struggled gaining weight. I struggled feeling comfortable in my skin, no matter what I was dealing with, right? But every time I would attach to one of those numerical goals, it would never bring me the solace that I want. It would never create a lifestyle of comfort where I wasn't constantly thinking about food or uncomfortable with certain uncomfortable that I felt in my body, because there was other things that I wasn't able to quantify. I was always chasing them because those are easier to chase. Our brain wants to hide behind those things because we can't quantify the emotions, the inner workings of our mind. It's often scary to relive and open some paths in our brain that makes it hard to do the necessary things that we know we should be doing, right? So I want to really clear something up before I get into anything, all right? There's only one way to lose weight, and that is to eat in a calorie deficit. Calorie deficit does not mean starve yourself. It means consistently eat less calories than you burn on a regular basis, right? Consistently. It's not just you do it one day and then you're down 10 pounds, right? You do it consistently. But this does not mean you starve yourself consistently, right? This means doing the things that are going to help you burn a little bit more calories more often, right? Building better lifestyle habits, better understanding, better awareness around your food and your actions, so that you make a deficit not feel like a deficit, and you can see sustainable results without the bullshit, right? Because even if you have a metabolic disease or autoimmune disease or anything like that, the one thing still prevails, that the body fat, the weight on your body, needs to be mobilized, needs to go through a process that tells it needs to use the energy, because body fat is used as energy to continue to survive. If we constantly consume the maintenance amount of calories or consume over the maintenance amount of calories, it's going to stay stagnant and not access the fat cells to utilize for energy, or it's going to, if you're over consuming, continue to store energy for later, right? And again, we need to establish a consistent calorie deficit to see fat loss. Now, where psychology comes into play with this, right? It makes it incredibly difficult to establish that deficit and consistently stay in it, right? Because some people can see short-term success, like any diet they've done: keto, intermittent fasting, paleo, carnivore, vegan, whatever the fucking thing is. it all does the same thing. It aims to help you consume fewer calories, right? And keto usually has a much quicker, turnaround, because not only are you consuming less calories, but when you consume less carbs, you lose a lot of water weight really quickly. I think for every 1 gram of carb in your system, you retain 4 ounces of water. So when you drastically cut out water, when you drastically cut out carbs, you lose a lot of water weight because you don't have as many carbs in your system to hold on to water, right? Carbohydrate. They're tied in together for that reason. But anyway, right? A lot of us have this headspace that we need to get a calorie deficit. We need to eat more or eat less, move more. So we need to just drastically make changes, right? But this is this is a big part of psychology, that if we just focus on it for 2 to 3 months and we just put all of our energy into it, we could be able to reverse all the stuff that we've been neglecting for the last, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, all the way up to for as long as we've been alive, right? I've worked with people in their 50s and 60s who struggle with their health their entire life. And then they sign on with me for 6 months, and it's very easy for them to get frustrated with lack of results, quote unquote, lack of results, because they always want to jump to, okay, what can't I have? What can't I have? What can't I have? Because they're not used to looking at this through a psychological lens. They're used to looking at the next thing that's holding them back, right? What's the one food that I can't have that's going to really transform my results? And really, that's not the case, right? We need to understand that what's going on between our ears, we are one decision away from truly transforming our life. It's a lot closer than we realize, and it lies between our ears, right? And usually there's three types of psychological struggles that make doing the mechanical things of consuming fewer calories and burning more calories a lot more difficult than it needs to be, right? And usually it all stems from this big one. So if you take nothing else but this away from this podcast, I want you to know that this big one is usually the biggest reason for all your struggles, negative feelings, setbacks that you don't understand, right? And it starts with a lack of clarity, right? And hear me when I say, just wanting to lose 20 to 30 pounds is not clarity, right? Just, I want to lose 20, 30 pounds. Done. Cool. I want to be more confident, right? I want to fit better in clothes. Cool. Awesome. All very valid, but that's not true clarity. That's you trying to attach to the quantifiable things that you think, and possibly even believe will help you feel better, right? But really, these are really what our clarity does is give us the reasoning, the fuel to keep trying, right? Because life is going to have its ups and downs. Nothing is ever truly going to be perfect, no matter how hard we try, right? So if we just have like, oh, I want to lose a little bit of weight, I want to fit better in my clothes, I want to feel more confident. Again, all valid, but they're not deep reasons to keep showing up. They're not deep enough, I should say. They're very surface level, right? Because you're going to have bigger stressors in your life that are going to be way louder at saying, hey, this is more important than those things, right? If you have kids and they get sick, or they have projects, or they have activities that you have to constantly make time for, right? You're wanting to lose about 20 pounds, it's not going to be nearly as important as that. If you have financial stressors, you can't pay your bills right now, and you have to scramble to find a way to pay your rent, right? Wanting to lose 30 pounds doesn't always match up to that level of importance, right? If you want to go out and enjoy yourself and not think about and not worry about the food choices that you make, right? And you don't want to feel restricted, well, that 30 pounds is not going to seem as enticing because you're going to feel super restricted if you don't address this first, right? You're going to have other things that you feel like are more important to you. And until we actually understand where your priorities are, what is on the other side of truly accomplishing the goal that you want, right? Deep down, you understand, then you'll have more reasons to still try and then be willing to modify what your lifestyle currently looks like without needing to change everything, right? A lot of people think that they have to cut out all the foods that they love, not go out and enjoy drinks, good food, parties, whatever, right? But you can do all those things and still lose weight. You just need to understand where it fits when you understand your priorities, your clarity of where you want to go, right? And this is also a big trigger of the knowing what to do and doing what to do, right? And oftentimes, knowing and doing do not connect. And this is what helps knowing and doing connect, is providing clarity. So, for example, I've struggled for the vast majority of my life with never quite feeling comfortable, good enough, and I was always lacking something. I was just I could never be quite satisfied with anything that I've done. So anything that I've achieved, anything that I've accomplished, it was never good enough. Never good enough, no matter what. I think out of all high school athletes, and football is a big part of my story, but all high school athletes, I think about less than 10% are able to go play college football. Actually, I think that's even less. I don't remember the actual statistics, but I think it's about 5 to 10% of all high school athletes go and play college football. And then of all the college football athletes, it's like less than like 3% of them go play professionally. So being in that like being even able to go get that chance to play college football is a pretty big achievement for a young man, for any athlete growing up, right? It's very easy to not even get that opportunity to do that. but even though I did get the opportunity, I got a scholarship. I had a scholarship to play football. Someone was paying me to play football and go to school at the same time. But in my head, it was a D2 school, and D2 is not D1, right? It's not good enough, but I guess it'll work, right? I was able to be a starter by the end of my actually at the beginning of my redshirt freshman year. I was as a starting linebacker, right, for my football team, but still wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough. And I would constantly tell myself that over and over and over again, even though I worked really hard. I did. I constantly worked hard, but it was never good enough to be worth anything, right? If I were to not be able to take care of a family member or not be able to show up for them, or even if I did show up for them and do the best and do something, the best way I could, it still would never be good enough. I could always do more. I could always do more, right? And then that carried over into, my after I lost football, I gained 45 pounds to try and play at a higher level. That still wasn't good enough. Right now, I had 45 pounds and I was no longer playing football. And no matter how hard I worked, it wasn't good enough to get that weight off. I got down to 215 at like 8% body fat. Guess what? I looked amazing, but it still wasn't good enough. Constantly drove me insane. And the problem I was facing is I didn't actually understand what I needed. And I was actually talking to one of my clients about this yesterday. When we have emotional responses, when something's not good enough, or we have a hard time showing up, or we always make excuses not to do the thing, right? There's usually a bigger reason behind it, right? If we're emotional eating or stress eating or anything like that, we're doing it for reasons that we may not identify. We may not have yet identified. There we go. Words are hard. And because of that situation, or because of that reality, we constantly chase other things that may fill in that gap that we don't necessarily understand yet. So what I had to do a lot of work on was just understanding my emotions. Why was nothing ever truly good enough? Why could I never feel satisfied with the accomplishments that I had, physical, mental, right, career-wise? I would never feel good enough. It would always never be enough. And then deep down, I had to do a lot of self-reflection. And this is the scary part. When we're understanding psychology, right? A lot of times when we look inward, we start to uncover a lot of rules, a lot of rules that we were either given or we accepted as we were growing up because of the environments that we were in, because of the people that we are around. Our brain only cares about understanding the rules of survival when we're born, right? It's not like we're not entirely ourselves until we understand the quote unquote rules, right? Again, we're the most adaptable creatures. Our biology, first and foremost, understands what does it mean to survive in this situation, right? And oftentimes we will develop defense mechanisms or rules that served us in the environment that we grew up in. And again, it doesn't always have to go this way, but a lot of times it does stem from what we learned as a kid or what we picked up as we kept getting older, right? When we tried something and it didn't quite work, or when we were raised by a certain parent, or where we were around a bunch of kids or a bunch of even adults that didn't necessarily align with the way that we want to feel, but we accepted that that's what it meant to survive in this scenario. So for me, my survival mechanism growing up in a house where my biological father, I don't know, he's in prison. My stepfather that raised the majority of my siblings and I taught me that no matter how hard I try, I can't defend or protect the people that I love. I was small in an abusive household and I couldn't do anything about it. And I was constantly reminded of that as a kid, right? And it's kind of scary when I went down that, because I started opening the doors of understanding the actual reason why I don't remember a lot of my childhood. And I'm not going to sit here and just try to get you a trauma bond. But again, this comes through understanding. Yours does not have to be as traumatic as mine. This is just my story. And I try to tell it as often as possible so people can understand that there's nothing wrong with you. You often learn behaviors that helped you in a scenario. And that scenario no longer serves its purpose as you've gotten older into adulthood. And you've just carried those rules, those behaviors, because that's all your brain knows. And when we're developing as kids, those are like our core memories. Those are what drives a lot of our choices as we get older, and we don't realize it because we're adults. We should know better, right? oftentimes if we had parental issues or anything, right, it's very difficult to transition and uncover those things because it's scary, right? Again, it doesn't have to be as traumatic as mine. I can't give a specific example off the top of my head, but because I went through that, I had to understand that I didn't feel worthy of ever being good enough. Feeling good was not in the cards because the rule that I learned in the environment that I was raised in, right, was that I could never do anything. I'm too weak. I am too small to amount to anything that could help or be a part of anything good. Good enough was never a thing. It was just never enough, right? And that sucked. I had to understand that. And that was the reason why nothing ever felt good. And when I started to uncover that, I was horrified. Because again, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, our brain loves quantifying things. It's easy to quantify numbers and body fat percentages and scale weight, right? Because we often have a hard time attaching the other feelings that we had if we're like going from like upstate where we're trying to remember when we were happiest, right? And usually we remember the number on the scale more than the actual relationship with food, the relationships we had around our family and friends, and the way our body felt, right? We remember the number more than the actual experience because the number is easier to remember. The number is easy to put for your brain to put its finger on. It can't quantify feelings. It can't quantify emotions, especially the ones that are hard to remember, that are scary and traumatic, that suck to relive. And we're the only creatures on this planet, that can think of something and our body responds like it's actually happening. So if you've gone through some tough times and you go back in your memory and you're just like playing the scenario that you went through again, you oftentimes feel your heartbeat start pounding like you're actually there again because we're the only creatures that can do that. We don't always live in the moment like dogs, cats, other animals that just operate off of what's today. How do I move on to the next day, right? We can live in the future. We can live in the past. That's what makes the present so much more difficult, right? So this is often, a lot of times, the driver for a lack of clarity. We don't actually understand what's getting in our own way, right? So this is why we say, I want to accomplish something, but then the next day we go and do the complete and utter opposite of that, right? I say I want to lose 30 pounds, but in reality, every time something happens, I always find a reason to eat very calorie dense snacks at the end of the day because it makes me feel better because all the stress I have going on in my life. But it completely contradicts what I want. Right. But I don't know how to put the two together is because, well, what you say you want isn't as important as staying the same, protected from the actual real reason. And we can't change something that we don't understand. All right. I'm beating this like a dead horse because, like I said, this is the most important thing. Right. Usually, if we are when it comes to psychology and weight loss, if we're having a hard time actually doing the things we know is beneficial for our goals, it's usually because we don't know the real reason why we can't do it. We don't understand it. Right. And when we actually start uncovering that, it's not going to be found in another workout program and another diet, right? Because those are just going to perpetuate the current feelings that you have with your diet, with your relationship with your food and your exercise. Right? We need to uncover what's actually getting in the way. And usually it's this lack of clarity and providing, I don't need to feel better in my body because I just need to feel worthy enough to be okay, to be good enough. Right? I need to practice feeling that. Right? Looking at what I currently do, because oftentimes and this is why I love working with the people that I work with, the high strung overachievers who like to constantly be busy doing other things, right? To just slow down and acknowledge the fact that everything you're doing is amazing. And it takes a lot of hard work to get to where you're at. And this is very specific. If you're not like this is okay. I still work with different people, but this is how I react. Right. This is how I've responded. Nothing's ever been good enough. Even if I achieve great things, it's not good enough. Right. And a lesson I had to learn to really understand this relationship with myself, to start feeling comfortable in my skin without a number, without a body fat percentage, was to look around and acknowledge the fact that I do work hard and I have accomplished great things because of it. And just practicing acknowledging that what I've done is good enough. And I think the biggest fear another fear that I had from just trying to practice that was if I acknowledged that what I was doing was enough, that I would stop, that I would revert back to really, really nasty behaviors that would be worse than where I'm at, than what I'm currently doing, like abuse, addiction, things I was surrounded by. And if I ever stopped, if I ever was too satisfied with everything I accomplished, if I acknowledged the fact that I am okay with everything I've done, I was scared it would be an admittance of, um, my admittance would be more of like, okay, I'm done. There's no more, there's nothing else for me to accomplish. There's nothing else for me to strive for. But it's not true, right? It's just a fear that I grew to understand based off the environment that I was in. But practicing acknowledging how hard I've worked is not a flaw. It's cool. I used to be here. Now I'm here. I get to go forward. I get to do more, right? In a way that actually aligns with me. It's not a need to constantly strive for more because I don't feel good enough if I don't. So, no, I can feel good about where I've come from. I can feel good about that, knowing that I had to work hard to do that and that I can continue to strive for more if I want to. There's a big difference between need and want. And that's what clarity, right, in the beginning helps provide for you. And if you can really understand that and understand if you're struggling with the different with saying something that you want and then constantly doing something contrary to what you say you want, there's usually a reason for it. And one more little tip for this before I move on to the next one. Oftentimes, there's two people in our heads, maybe three, depending on which reference you use. But I like to simplify it to two. All right. There's usually a like preteen, angsty version of ourselves that's always whining and raving and throwing tantrums to get what it wants immediately in the moment. Right. And then there's the adult version of us, the one who's supposed to be the parent of the situation, who's supposed to calm the toddler down and give them what they need, not what they want. Right. And oftentimes the toddler or the preteen or the preteen or the angsty preteen throwing the tantrum gets what it wants: the chocolate, the candy, the immediate gratification of reducing stress with food or lack of movement, lack of exercise, distracting ourselves from the actual problem. But the parent, we have to be the parent for ourselves in our minds. And when we can step in and say, hey, this is not going to solve our problem. This is actually going to make it worse. This is going to make it harder for us to get to our goals. We need to look at this logically. Right. And if we constantly listen to you, we're always going to be over consuming calories, making it harder to get into that consistent calorie deficit. We're always going to try to hide our emotions with food, with TV, with alcohol, with whatever we struggle with. Right. That's the tantrum throwing. That's the preteen version of you throwing their tantrums. Right. And we need to be the adult and explain the logic back in and catch that preteen and say, this isn't who I want to be. It's a part of who I am, right? We can't get rid of it. It's there for a reason, right? It's just wanted to help. It just wants to help you feel better, but it can't think ahead. So if you can start catching yourself between those two versions of you and start inserting your adult voice more often, you're going to feel more capable. You're going to feel a lot better, and you're going to be able to look at clarity on the. You're going to be able to provide yourself the clarity of you're taking care of yourself the way that you need to. And that's going to develop the relationship with your food, with your body, with yourself. That will lead to the physical results that you say you want, right? If they truly align with how you want to live your life, right? Not everyone needs to have a six pack. That's okay. That's like totally fine. Not everyone needs to be not everyone has to be a certain number on the scale. That's fine, right? If you want those things, make sure that it's actually you and it's not your preteen version thinking it's going to solve a bigger problem with a short-term fix. So I really wanted to hone in on that and really drive that home, because if you don't get that right, it's an uphill battle all the way from there. You're constantly going to be getting in your own way, right? That's the psychology that's going into this. That's making it harder for you to stay consistent in a way that actually aligns with your goals, not just because I have to cut out carbs to lose weight. Yeah, it worked, quote unquote, worked for you in the past, but if you regained all the weight that you lost because you didn't plan on staying on keto for the rest of your life because it didn't actually align with you, because you're chasing a number on a scale and not a lifestyle of understanding and taking care of yourself, didn't actually work just because you had the physical result that your brain constantly identifies, right? Another big part of another category of people that the psychology of weight loss gets in the way for is the all or nothing person. Right. I am also an all or nothing person. And I guess I've always been a version of these things. I guess I combined my 1 and 3, right? Lack of clarity, is usually, if we don't understand the real reasons why we want to make change, we're going to have a hard time, right? And then I went into my own story of the never good enough. Things can never be good enough, right? That's a big part of what makes it hard for us to be consistent, because we're always striving for more and never being content and just happy with what we have, right? Or what we've accomplished. It doesn't mean you're satisfied. It doesn't mean you're done, right? So lack of clarity, never feeling good enough. And then the last one, there's probably more, but the last one when it comes to psychology is the all or nothing person, right? I'm either doing everything right or I'm doing nothing right. And I hear it all the time. I'm just an all or nothing kind of person. So, and I actually heard this from my good friend Jared Hamilton. I gotta get him on the podcast. I did. I gotta bring him back because he's great. I learn a lot from him, and I've always aligned with the way he teaches. But he usually describes all or nothing. And I'm pulling it from him because it's just a great thing. It's an excuse. It's something that excuses our behaviors that are direct contradictory to our goals. It's like, yeah, I'm all or nothing person. I either do everything right or I don't do anything. So yeah, so I'm just gonna, if I have one bad meal, it's just a bad day. It's all downhill from here, right? That's not a sustainable relationship with food. Just giving yourself the excuse to say, yeah, my goals don't matter as much as I say they do, right? And that's not fair. That's not fair to you and everything that you want to accomplish, right? And again, we need to catch this. We need to identify this. Like, is this how you always want to respond? This is one of my favorite questions to ask my clients when they're going through these mental throws. Is this how you always want to respond to a situation? You always want to immediately throw your goals down the drain, right? And it's always like, well, no. It's like, good. And then we need to understand that the problem isn't the fact that you can't stay motivated for 3 months. The problem is that this relationship of being all or nothing is making it really hard to stay consistent. Because the most important thing needed to see results is consistency. Calorie deficit doesn't mean starve yourself consistently. You can do that. You can see results. But does that actually align with you? Probably not. Right. And this all ties back into the same thing I was talking about. Clarity. Why do I respond this way? Right. Is this the example I want to set for my kids, my family? Do I want to be that person? Right. Or is there a better way? Is there a better way I can be living my life that I didn't even think it could be possible because I'm so used to how miserable this process is? Our brain gets our brain gets what it's used to. It always will look for the things to confirm its beliefs, and it makes it hard to see the actual path forward. Right. So we have to catch these things. We have to see them and see if it is actually us. Right. Because this is what leads to the most important thing needed to understand the psychology of weight loss, and then connect the psychology and the mechanics. Right. The mindset and the mechanical pieces that lead to the physical transformations that you see online all the time, right? You can see a transformation of somebody and they post about it. They're so excited, but if they didn't work on the mental stuff, I guarantee you they're terrified every single day of losing the results. And trust me, I've been there. I got to a place where I was happy physically, but I was mortified afterwards because I thought that, well, not only did that not fix my problems, but now I have something to lose. And I post on social media and everyone's going to judge me. Everyone's going to see that I failed. I want to tell you a secret for those of you who may have had that experience or have been through that before, or have seen people or know people. Nobody cares about you as much as they care about themselves. So just because you post one thing on social media, and this is from working on social media for a very long time, you'll make one post and you'll feel like it's the most informative or most sincere thing on the planet. No one other than outside of like your immediate friends and family will like truly like intake that for longer than like a week, if that. You're lucky if they think about your post for a week. I don't even think it's that. It's probably like less than like 2 days, right? Less than a day. Because just think, everyone's always distracted. Everyone's constantly scrolling, skimming. So your video, your picture, right? Someone may like it, someone may comment on it, but the second it's gone, they're not thinking about it anymore. Not nearly as much as you are. Because we live in our own heads. We all have our own shit that we're going through, and we're all not alone. But I want to go down that we're not alone in the struggles that we have. We all have the same struggles, right? We may look and idolize people who say they don't, or they look like they have it all together, but we all will have the same insecurities and struggles. And I don't even know how I got down this rabbit hole. Oh, right. Because again, the physical is not the answer to your problems. It's creating a lifestyle of alignment, right? And having clarity, understanding the mental relationship that you have and the actual things that you need to provide yourself to create an aligned lifestyle, right? Doesn't just mean healthy. An aligned choice does not always mean healthy. Sometimes I want to have 12 deep fried wings. I fucking love wings. Wings are amazing. And if you told me that to see the results that I wanted, I could never touch wings again, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. Right? That's understanding alignment, right? Aligned choice just is sometimes it means wings, but then it's also considering what my physical goals are. If I want to have wings and I also want to maintain a certain body fat percentage, maintain a certain amount of muscle definition, I probably shouldn't be eating wings for every single meal, every single day. Probably shouldn't be eating wings every day in general. Maybe it's once or twice every month, and that's okay, right? That's okay. That works for me because I know what I want to accomplish, right? And that's when we understand the mental side of this, you get to the point where you get to make these aligned choices, that you get to do what you want to do that aligns with your health and your goals, right? Everything can fit in your diet. It just has to align with you, right? That's why I try to move my clients away from saying good or bad, right? There's no good or bad choices. There's aligned choices or misaligned choices. And usually misaligned choices are the ones that leave us feeling frustrated, defeated, and want to give up. It's like because we crossed the line with ourselves. It's like, oh, I had one bad meal, and then I was like, well, I feel bad about it, so I'm just going to go down and say, fuck the rest of the week, and I'll start again on Monday. That's a misaligned choice because that's not how you always want to respond, right? You don't always want to start again on Monday, right? If you blow out, this is a good analogy. If you pop one tire while you're driving on the road, you don't sit there, pop out, and pop off all the rest of the tires, right, to drive home. No, you change the spare tire. You go through the inconvenience and change it, or you call someone to help you, right? It's a great analogy because, I mean, it's crazy. It would be crazy if we popped one tire and to just go down that same rabbit hole, we pop the rest, right? We wouldn't think about doing that because, well, why the fuck would we do that? That's going to make my problems a lot more difficult, right? Same philosophy, right? If you always make misaligned choices and you don't understand them, you're constantly popping the other tires. So we have to catch that. But okay, I had one bad meal, right? Or I'm sorry, excuse me, got to catch it first. I had one misaligned meal, right? But why did I have that misaligned meal? Was I in an environment that I couldn't control? Was I super stressed? And was it just convenient for me to say that? Say yes. Okay, so the choice wasn't the choice wasn't bad. All right. If it was the only thing I could have, we're good. If it was the only thing I could have eaten in the situation, right? How could I have modified the choice to feel a little bit better about it, right? If it was wings, right? Could I have grilled wings instead of fried wings or baked wings, right? Could I have eaten a little less of it, knowing that I gave myself the ability to try, so I don't go down the usual rabbit hole of giving up, right? And an aligned choice is, you know what? I want to eat foods that help me feel good, help me feel satisfied, that align with my goals more often, right? Because what we do most of the time matters more than anything else. And if we have like an occasional off couple meals a week, right? Well, it's not even off if it's an aligned choice, if it's a date night, if it's a celebration, right? If you have that once or twice a week, right? But the rest of the week you're making aligned choices because not because you have to, because it's how you want to, it emphasizes how you want to feel. And it's going to amplify where you want to go physically, right? You're creating a lifestyle, you're creating comfort, you're creating understanding and a relationship with yourself and your food that's on your terms. You're creating control around your choices that allows you to feel good about it, right? This is when we understand this concept of being aligned with who we are, what we want to be, and that comes through clarity first, identifying the thought patterns that hold us back, right? And we remind ourselves what's the most important thing, right? How do we want to show up? How do we want to respond to situations? Where do we want to be physically? And why is that important to us, right? Where does my thoughts come from? It makes doing the mechanical stuff of weight loss, of losing weight, of intentionally lowering your calories, right? Not starving yourself, eating more nutrient dense options that make you feel like you're eating more food than you actually ever have before, but calorically it's less. So you start losing weight without feeling miserable. And you're making more of your aligned choices more often, right? You're making nutrient dense choices more often, so that gives you the wiggle room for every now and again, right, to say yes to a celebration, to cake, to dessert, whatever it is, right? But it's not the majority of the time, because our body responds to what we do the majority of the time, right? And this is why mechanically it could be difficult if we don't understand psychology, because we often make misaligned choices more often. That's what our body reflects. But if we make aligned choices more often, right, aligned choices with our health and our goals, and then we create the wiggle room to live our life at the same time, we can see the results that we want. Just takes a little, I don't even want to say it takes a little bit more time, right? It takes a little bit more time of doing the work necessary to see the result that we truly want deep down. So yeah, you may not see weight loss for 3 months. Oh my God, that's horrifying. But what's 3 months to struggling with your problems for decades? Right. And this is what I try to help my clients understand. And I want to save them the time. Like, it's not supposed, just because you've struggled with this for your whole life doesn't mean that you will struggle with it for the rest of your life. Right. I've seen clients in their 40s, 50s, and 60s struggle with these relationships in their brain. And, I get them for, 6 to 12 months, and they have a completely different perspective, and they're living a lifestyle that they enjoy. Right. And 6 to 12 months sounds like a long time. But again, when you compare it to how long you fucking struggled, it's not very long. That's why I try to talk about this as much as possible, because we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. We need to hear this and understand this over and over and over until it clicks. Because if we don't understand this, we will always be stuck in the rat race of doing things that make us feel miserable, don't actually help us feel any better, and then makes it way more difficult to see the results that we want. So I hope it makes sense. I hope this helps you. And again, I really appreciate if this helps open some doors for you, help shift your perspective. If you share this episode with at least one person. If you ever need anything, if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on social media. I do my best to connect with everybody, to respond to questions. And I want you to be the best version of you. That's all. All right. So I'm gonna stop rambling here. I actually had notes. I still kind of, every time I write notes, I still kind of go all over the place, but that's all good. I hope it made sense. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to let me know. I'll see you on the next one.